to the entertaining Talkin' Sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video as training camp is set to kick off today for the New York Giants. That was the date that it was reported. I believe that they said that things were going to get started around noon. I haven't heard anything as of yet. But in this video, I kind of wanted to dive into some of the players that I could see potentially fighting for their jobs. Now, most of these guys probably will make the team, especially due to the fact that it is a shortened preseason. There's no preseason games, so it's going to be harder, I think, for some of these undrafted free agents to make the team for the New York Giants. But there are certainly some of them that could potentially compete to make the team. Guys like Javon Leak, a number of the wide receivers that the New York Giants brought in, I think are the guys that have the best chance to compete to make this roster. But without preseason games, it could be an uphill battle for these teams. In addition to that, another thing I wanted to talk about was the opt-outs. Now, this is starting to take place throughout the NFL. We have not heard any New York Giants on that list yet, but already 16 players from what I counted have opted out for the 2020 NFL season, of course, due to the fact of the pandemic. 6 of whom are on the New England Patriots. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick look at the players that have already opted out for the New England Patriots, and it is some pretty household names there. Dante Hightower, Patrick Chung, and Brandon Bolden was a running back selected by the New England Patriots. Those are pretty household names, specifically the first two, and were big parts of that New England defense. And the question is this something that may start to catch fire around the league? Like I said, I don't think I saw more than 2 players on any other team, but already 16 players have opted out. We'll have to wait and see. One of the names that's been talked about is Nate Solder. Of course, Nate Solder has a sick child at home. A lot of people pointed to the fact that that may have been why he played poorly last year, and it's certainly a valid excuse. And hopefully that's not the case. I think we could use as much depth as we can get at that tackle position. But if he were to opt out, at least it would open up some salary cap space for the New York Giants, as I believe that it does not go against the cap, or at least most of it doesn't. I don't know all the specificities with that. And if the Giants do, if some of their players decide to opt out, I will definitely look into that to look at some of the options that the New York Giants may be able to bring in to replace the player. But we'll have to wait and see how that all plays out. In terms of some of the players that I think really need to prove themselves going into camp for the New York Giants if they want to retain their job or possibly see an opportunity to be in the starting lineup, I wrote down a number of names, but the first name that really comes to mind for me is Wayne the Train Gallman. Wayne Gallman, of course, was drafted by Jerry Reese, so he has no connections to anybody within the New York Giants organization in terms of upper management. New head coach, Dave Gettleman, didn't draft him, and Gallman over the last 2 years, for lack of a better word, has been underwhelming. Now, of course, he hasn't gotten much of an opportunity. Last year, he only had 29 carries, and he only has 80 carries combined over the last 2 years. In his rookie season, he was pretty effective. He averaged 4.3 yards a carry. But the last 2 years, he's had under 300 yards rushing combined with just 80 carries. And he's averaged 3.8 and 3.5 yards per carry. Now, of course, it's hard to get things going when you're not getting much of an opportunity. But he's been underwhelming. The New York Giants went out there. They brought in a veteran running back who, of course, has connections to Joe Judge with Dion Lewis, who most people probably expect to be the primary backup running back for this New York Giants team. In addition to that, like I said, they have Javon Leak. So I would not be shocked if Wayne Gallman does not come in prepared to play for the New York Giants if he is cut. Do I think he will be? I'm leaning no. I would slightly favor him possibly over Leak, or maybe they just decide to carry 5 running backs. I think Gallman will ultimately make the team, but he's certainly not a lock, and he better come prepared to play for the New York Giants because, like I said, over the last 2 years, he definitely has not been a competent backup running back, even though he has been underutilized. They haven't used him as much as I personally would have liked. Now I kind of want to get into that cornerback position because that is a huge question mark going into training camp for the New York Giants. Now that DeAndre Baker is on the exempt list, I think we have to at least assume that there's a very high probability that DeAndre Baker will not be playing for the New York Giants, if not for the whole season, definitely to start the season. With the shortened offseason and everything else, he's not going to be able to get into shape. I don't see it. As of now, he's not allowed to play in games for the New York Giants. So with all that being said, I think you have a number of question marks in that secondary. The first guy I'm going to talk about is Sam Beal. Sam Beal, we spent a supplemental pick on 2 or 3 years ago, whatever it was, and he's had injury concerns for the New York Giants, right? He hasn't been able to see the field, and when he saw the field last year, he was underwhelming. Now, he's going to have an opportunity, unless the New York Giants go out there and decide to bring in a free agent outside, an exterior cornerback, he's going to have an opportunity to start in place of DeAndre Baker. Now, of course, there could be other guys, Julian Love, Darnay Holmes, who may get that opportunity as well. But Sam Beal, they had a first-round grade on. Dave Gettleman obviously felt very highly about Sam Beal, or the New York Giants, rather, felt very highly about Sam Beal when they brought him in here. That doesn't mean that he's going to make this team, though. If he is injured and is, not proven to be back to where he was, I wouldn't be shocked if he was cut. He's been very underwhelming, and the same could be said for Corey Ballentine. Ballentine was a late-round draft pick. He has to have a strong camp. We all like his upside. He's got athletic ability, but he was not very good when he got the opportunity last year, which should have been expected. He was going to a small college, but those two players are guys that if they have very poor camps, could potentially be cut. I don't think they're sure things. I'm leaning that they will make the team for sure, but I think those are two household names that have to prove themselves going into training camp, and both of them, if they have a great training camp, possibly have the opportunity to be starting on the opposite side. The other guy that I really wanted to talk about in that secondary is Grant Haley. Grant Haley, the former teammate of Saquon Barkley at Penn State. I think we all forget about him because we talk about Darnay Holmes, we talk about Julian Love. Grant Haley was a starting slot cornerback for the New York Giants. He's a very good open field tackler, not very good in coverage. He was pretty good in his rookie year for the New York Giants, but last year he got used and abused. Now, was it partially due to the scheme? Maybe the New York Giants could get a lot out of him. Do I think he'll be starting this year? Probably not. But if a guy like Darnay Holmes possibly moves to the outside and you want to leave Julian Love at that safety position, maybe that opens up an opportunity for Grant Haley to be the starting slot cornerback. But I think all three of those guys are potential cut candidates if they don't impress at training camp for the New York Giants. But by the same token, all three of them have an opportunity to carve out a role in this New York Giants defense. So the pressure is on for all three of those individuals in the New York Giants secondary. The next guy I really wanted to talk about was a player that was drafted by Dave Gettleman the first year that Gettleman was here. I believe he was drafted in the 5th round of the 2018 draft out of Miami, R.J. McIntosh. Hasn't really seen the field a whole lot with the New York Giants. I believe he played in 12 games last year, only saw the field 25% of the time. I think that was like the most he saw the field in any game last year for the New York Giants. So he hasn't been used a lot. I think he was banged up a bit in his rookie season. He did have 2 sacks and limited playing time last year for the Giants, and I think he's a guy with some ability, and he's a guy that Dave Gettleman clearly believed in. But if you look at this defensive line right now for the New York Giants, with the, obviously acquisition of Leonard Williams last year, Dexter Lawrence, Dalvin Tomlinson, B.J. Hill, and now you bring in Austin Johnson, who has connections to the defensive line coach from Penn State, a former second-round pick. I think it's going to be very hard for McIntosh to even make this team. Now, he may make the team, but he could be on the outside looking in. He will definitely need to impress in training camp to remain on with the New York Giants and not be put on the practice squad. So that's another guy with a lot of pressure. A guy that a lot of us had some high hopes for coming out of college, but really hasn't gotten much of an opportunity since then. And maybe if he went to another team, maybe he would get that opportunity. With the Giants, I just see it as a logjam, and I don't really think he's going to get much of an opportunity to play this year. The next guy I really want to talk about, there's 2 more guys, Ryan Connelly. Ryan Connelly is a guy that New York Giants fans absolutely love. He had 4 starts for the New York Giants last year, 3 or 4 games in which he played in, and he had 2 interceptions. He had a good nose for the ball. He was, seemed to be a good tackler, guy that has some upside. When we drafted him, he was thought to be a special teams contributor. We didn't expect much out of that out of Wisconsin, but he certainly displayed that we have to at least give him an opportunity to prove whether or not he could be a valuable linebacker in the NFL. He has an opportunity to start. The problem with him is he's coming off a major injury. He has to prove in training camp that he is fully recovered. And if he does, he may very well be starting alongside Martinez. If he doesn't, expect Mayo to get that spot. And if he's not healthy, there's a good chance he doesn't make this team. So Connelly has to come out and prove his worth. He has to prove that he's fully healthy, he's fully healed, and he's still the same player he was before that injury. He's a guy that a lot of New York Giants fans are rooting for, and a guy that we have high hopes for that could potentially be that starting middle linebacker alongside Martinez for the years to come. But like I said, has to prove he's healthy and has to prove he's the same player that we saw in those 4 games and has to prove that that wasn't a fluke. And then finally, the last guy I want to talk about that has a lot of pressure, perhaps the biggest battle going into training camp, is the center position. Shane Lemieux's on the team. They drafted him. He's a rookie, 5th-round draft pick. Not much pressure there to make the team. Gates is on the team. He's got a lot of versatility. Spencer Pulley, I think there's a little bit of pressure on to come into camp, ready to go. He's the only guy that's ever played center in the NFL. You would probably tag him as the favorite going in with no preseason games or anything else. But if he comes out sloppy, doesn't look good, Maybe Spencer Pulley gets cut. Do I think he will be? No, but this is an opportunity really for Pulley to go out there and get an opportunity to be a starting center. Maybe he impresses the team and gets to carve out a niche for the New York Giants going forward. Of course, last year, he got beat out by John Halapio. Halapio was also trying to make his way back, but the center position is a huge question mark. Probably the biggest question mark, maybe outside of the exterior cornerback position going into training camp. And that is something that I will definitely closely monitor and keep my eyes on as to what they're saying of what's going on at that position, who's getting the reps up with the first team, second team, so on and so forth. But those are some of the names going into training camp that I think need to impress, whether it be to get an opportunity to potentially start or to just make the roster in general. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.